Welcome back to this Monday edition of Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. And Rob, let's prepare to cut this segment into two if we can. I want to begin by, I'd love to get your reactions to this column. We can take kind of reactions through the course of the program today to this column, Why Women Still Need Husbands. This is an opinion piece by Suzanne Venker on foxnews.com. Number to call if you want to weigh in on this topic, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Do women still need husbands? I'm just going to read this. I may intersperse some comments, but just listen to what this woman has to say. Over the past several decades, America has witnessed a profound change in the way women view men and marriage. It began with the baby boomer adage, never depend on a man. This message resulted in a generation of women who turned their attention away from the home and onto the workforce. They did what their mothers told them to do. They became financially independent so they'd never have to rely on a husband. In time, never depend on a man turned into the full-blown belief that men are superfluous. In 2010, Jennifer Aniston claimed women needn't, quote, fiddle with a man, end quote, to have a child. This may strike you as an isolated case of stupidity, but Aniston's willingness to put it out there speaks volumes about modern cultural attitudes. No actress would have said such a thing in the 70s, 80s, or even in the early 90s. Fortunately, most women come to the realization that they do, in fact, need a man, at least if they want a family. Financial independence is a great thing, but you can't take your paycheck to bed with you. And there's nothing empowering about being beholden to an employer when what you really want is to have a baby. That's dependency of a different sort. So it's interesting, her point is that the women's movement started with kind of this goal in mind of female independence. Instead, these people became chained to an employer when what they wanted to do was to stay home and raise a family. This is the conclusion to which most women have come. Research shows that what women want more than anything else is not to work full-time and year-round, but to live balanced lives. I think the last survey I saw on this indicated 71% of mothers, I don't know if it was women or just mothers, but those who work outside the home wish they could be home full-time. Probably working moms. 71% of working moms, if they had a choice, would stay home and be full-time a homemaker. So that's what's in a woman's heart. That's what she wants to do. That's her dream, is to be able to devote her full energies to making a home for her husband and for her children. How will they do it? That is, how will women live balanced lives and not have to work year-round? How will they do it? That's the number one conversation among women today. Round and round we go, asking how women can gain more control over their lives. How can they spend more time with their children? How can they make time for exercise or even a social life? How can they keep their houses in order and still have time to cook? The answer is obvious. Lean on your husband. According to Pew Research, dads are much more likely than moms to say they want to work full-time. And when it comes to what they value most in a job, working fathers place more importance on having a high-paying job, while working mothers are more concerned with having a flexible schedule. And there's only one way to get it. Rely on a man's more linear career goals. Unlike women, a man's identity, this is important to get because this is biblical. This is right out of Genesis 3. Remember in Genesis 3, when God talks about what's gone wrong as a result of the fall, he said to the woman, where you're going to experience the effect of the fall is in your relationship with your husband and with your children, in your marriage and in your family. That's where you're going to have to deal with the consequences of the fall. When he talked to the man, he says where you're going to have to deal with the consequences of the fall is in your labor. The ground is now going to resist you. It is going to produce thorns and thistles, and it will only be by the sweat of your brow that you will be able to feed yourself and your family. And remember with Eve, he said, look, the effect of the fall is going to increase your pain in childbearing. Your desire will be for your husband, yet he shall rule over you. There would be sort of a disorder. Men were supposed to lead, but they're not supposed to be tyrants. And so he says to the woman, look, this is going to be one of the effects. There's going to be some dysfunction. You're going to have men, instead of being leaders, they're going to want to be tyrants. And that's the effect of the fall on human nature. Hang on a second. Disconnected myself again. A bad habit I have developed here. Anyway, so she says a man's identity is inextricably linked to his paycheck and to his work. It's important to understand that. That's where a man finds his identity and his sense of value and significance. That's how most men feel a sense of purpose. Indeed, it is. To have a worthwhile job, a job that's making some kind of contribution, that's some kind of meaningful work. Doesn't have to be fancy or glitzy or prominent or get a lot of attention, but it needs to be meaningful work where a man, when he goes to work, he knows he's doing something that has value, and he's working hard to provide for the people who are dependent upon him, his wife and his children. That's all a part of a man's sense of worth. That's how most men, she says, feel a sense of purpose. Indeed, research shows men see it as their duty to support their families, even when their wives make as much money or more as they do. In other words, she points out that, look, men feel this responsibility keenly. Even if their wives make more money than they do, they still sense it is their responsibility to provide for their families. Where does that come from? Well, that comes from the way that God has made us. That's imprinted deep on the soul of every man. Perhaps that's because men can't produce life the way women can. Let's face it, there are some serious shoes to fill, but they can produce the means to make a child's life secure. As a nation, we dismiss this integral part of masculinity, but that doesn't make it any less true. So why not let husbands bring home the bulk of the bacon so women can have the balanced lives they seek? Great question. Let me repeat it. Why not let husbands bring home the bulk of the bacon so women can have the balanced lives they seek? And this, by the way, this is another aside, but this is, by the way, why we want a prosperous, strong, growing, healthy economy. We want jobs to grow. We want wages to grow. Why? So men can provide for their families, and so that the wives that they love, the mothers of their children, can devote their full energies to making a home for the family. That's what we want. Now, we're not going to compel anybody to do it. They don't have to do it. We're not going to make anybody do this. But we know that this is a hunger that's deep in the heart of every woman. She'd stay home full-time if she could. We want to make that possible. You know, people talk about the shrinking labor force participation rate and how I think it's down between 58 and 59% now of the labor force. These are people that are old enough to be in the workforce but actually have jobs. It's down to below 59% now, historic lows. You know, my ideal labor force participation rate is about 50%, because my ideal labor force participation rate would be to have every man with a full-time job, working hard, being productive, bringing home the bacon, and then have the other half of the population, the wives and mothers, able to stay home and provide care for their children. So I'm looking for a labor force participation rate of about 50%. But in order to get there, we've got to have a growing economy. A lot of couples feel the pressure to have both people generating an income just to make ends meet. Now, if you have a growing economy, a prosperous economy, wages are growing, they're getting higher, it begins to create more possibilities for husbands to be able to be the sole and primary breadwinner, so their wives can stay home, and their home then can be a place where they can express their creativity, and all of their talent and their heart and their soul can be poured in to creating an atmosphere in their home. So again, I repeat the question, why not let husbands bring home the bulk of the bacon so women can have the balanced lives they seek? There's no way to be a wife, a mother, and a full-time employee and still create balance. Can't be done. You cannot be a wife, a mother, and a full-time employee and still create balance. And those wives that are doing that and are trying to do, you know that. I mean, you're sitting there saying, yeah, you wish it wasn't true, but you know there's only so much of you to go around. You've only got so much of you to give. Everybody's only got so much physical energy. Everybody's only got so much psychic energy. By that I mean energy of the mind and heart and emotion. You only got so much of that to go around. And if you've got an employer that's siphoning off a big chunk of that, it doesn't leave a lot left over for the people that you care most about in your life. But you can have balance by depending on a husband who works full-time and year-round. She finishes this way. I know what you're going to say. Where are these husbands on whom women can depend? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the job of the church, frankly, and that's the job of parents. Your job, Dad, is to raise a son who believes in this, who is committed to working full-time so he can provide for the wives and children, the wife and children who are dependent upon him. So that's the job of dads and moms to raise sons to do this. It's the job of the church to turn out mature men who young women want to marry because he's strong, he's stable, he's going somewhere with his life, he's committed to family and all that kind of stuff. Where are these husbands on whom women can depend? And you're right, there are fewer men these days who seem eager to be primary breadwinners, but ask yourself why, and I bet you know the answer. So part of the task, I think, again, it's a matter of kind of cultural re-education, is we need to grow young men up to the place where they want to be primary, if not exclusive breadwinners. That's their goal. That's what they're aiming for. They don't want to be dependent on their wives to provide part of the family income. If it's any way possible, they want to be the primary and even sole breadwinner for their families. So I'd love to know what you think about all that. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. Now, when we come back, we'll start taking some of your calls. I want to talk about this deal with Iran, this nuclear deal with Iran, and just to set the table for that. This is an extremely, extremely bad deal for Israel. And I believe that makes it a bad deal for the United States. And we'll look at Genesis 12 and why the United States as a Christian nation, why it's imperative that we be a friend and supporter and ally of Israel. And really, as I see this nuclear deal with Iran, this is President Obama selling out our ally Israel, selling them down the river, making them increasingly vulnerable, making Israel's life more dangerous, and making the world a more dangerous place. Back in 2, Focal Point AFR Talk.